We've got a Zion Williamson medical update. He's going to be rehabbing away from the Pelicans. Is this a story? Is it a non-story, a big deal, a non-big deal, a little bit of both? Let's break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday, doing a show I didn't think we were going to be doing whatsoever. We've got a Zion Williamson update from the team, including the first quote from Zion Williamson we've had since media day. I'm going to read this to you guys here in just a second. So, look, there's a couple of ways to read into the announcement, the press update that the Pelicans gave today, and there's a way that they can fix all of this too, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. So thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen every single day. We're free and available 5 days a week for you all. No paywall or anything like that. Breaking down the biggest stories. And look, Zion's always going to be the biggest story. And yes, this update that they gave us, while on the surface, it's like, okay, cool, whatever, shouldn't be a big deal, kind of is. And that's what we'll talk about in the second segment of today's show. So this is why it's important that we do talk about these sorts of things. So subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show as well. Leave a 5-star review with a comment. And of course, subscribe and follow and comment on YouTube. And the question for YouTube today is going to simply be, is this a big deal or not? Is this a big thing or just a non-issue, a non-story? Let me know what you think in the YouTube comments. So here's the update from the Pelicans. The email reads from the Pelicans PR, Zion Williamson update for immediate release, January 5th. 2022 New Orleans. The Pelicans announced today that forward Zion Williamson will be continuing his rehabilitation away from the team at this time while remaining under the supervision of the Pelicans medical staff. Quote, since we notified everyone on December 16th of his latest imaging, it was decided then by our medical team to dial back his rehab to only partial weight-bearing activities. He continues along this path, end quote, stated Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations David Griffin. Quote, we also agreed that in order to put Zion in the best position to succeed, he will rehab away from the team at this time so he can focus on the task at hand, end quote. Okay. And then they have a quote from Zion Williamson. Quote, as you can imagine, this has been a very difficult process for me. I know there's work to be done in my recovery before I can safely return to the court, but I will continue to put in the time necessary so I can get back on the floor with my team and represent Pelicans fans and the city of New Orleans at the highest level. Basketball means everything to me, and I am thankful for the Pelicans organization and everyone who surrounded me with love and support throughout this journey. My family, friends, teammates, coaches, staffs, fans, and everyone who stood behind me and uplifted me when I needed it the most, end quote. And that's the end of the statement. So again, two ways to read into this. The first and foremost is like no big deal, right? He's rehabbing. He had an injection in his foot. He's rehabbing after that. He's going to a place where he thinks he can simply do it a little bit better. Players rehab away from their teams all the time. Klay Thompson didn't stay with the Golden State Warriors for the majority of the past 2 seasons, rehabbing that injury. Kawhi Leonard rehabs away from the Los Angeles Clippers in San Diego. After DeMarcus Cousins tore his ACL here in New Orleans, he rehabbed away from the team, right? You haven't seen Kira Lewis Jr. on the bench since his injury because he's just getting better and dealing with all of that stuff. So to not have Zion Williamson around while he's rehabbing this isn't necessarily a big surprise. It's a little weird given that he had been with the team and you had seen him on the bench regularly, and now all of a sudden they're saying, no, he's not going to do that and that isn't the best for him, and it kind of makes you go, what changed? But we'll talk about that in the next segment. So the first part of this is, this is perfectly normal. This is just a normal thing, right? He's just rehabbing. He's doing it up in Portland, according to Woj of ESPN. Basically, probably meaning he's with Nike and just hanging out with Nike and doing the rehab and everything up there. And the Pelicans, as they have been, are involved in this and know everything that's going on. So he's away from the team, and it's no big deal. If this can help him get back out on the court and heal quicker, we should be all for it. So That's the part that I think on the surface makes sense, right? Like, I don't really have an issue with that. I think part of this is it's just not healing well. Like, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's just not occurring at the rate and speed in which we would like. That's an okay thing. It's part of life. It's how these injuries tend to go with big men. These foot injuries are really delicate. It takes a lot of time. We've seen it time and time again in the NBA. But there's also another way to read this, right? Did this team really need to put out this statement? Was this prompted by something? And what prompted it? So let's read more into this, because I actually think this next part's important. Like, I don't mind this part of the show, right, where it's just, this is what it is, and that's kind of it on the surface level. But I also do think there's probably more to it than that. And that's what I want to talk about coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Shopify. Cha-ching! It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. I used to work at a bank. Treasury management stuff like this, it can cost a whole lot. That is not the case with Shopify. They make this very accessible to you at whatever level your business is in. So scaling your business is a journey of endless possibilities, and Shopify can help you do this. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed from down the street to around the globe. So reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more, and gain insight as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. You've got to know your numbers, right? When you're running your business, Shopify helps you do that. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is a possibility powered by Shopify. So go to shopify.com/lockedonnba, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba right now. Shopify.com/lockedonnba. All right, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen every single day. Now, for your next listen, go check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Don't just look at the box score, right? You need to have all the context around everything that's going on. Otherwise, if you look at the box score, you're not going to see the craziness and weirdness that was the end of the Lakers and Kings game, and understand why Alvin Gentry said that is the worst call he's ever seen in his NBA career, which is very, very long. So go listen to Locked On Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch it on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. All right, so we're talking about the Zion Williamson update that the Pelicans gave us. On the surface level, it's like, fine, this seems kind of normal. He's injured. He doesn't need to be around the team going through some of that day-to-day. He can just go focus on the rehab elsewhere. But then you really start to think about it and look at the statement, and it's weird. Like, they didn't need to put this out. When you heard me read that update, and if you've seen it yourself, is there any news in there at all? Was this something that needed to be said? And the answer is just a big fat no, right? It's a big no. You didn't need this. This is exactly in line with the last update we got on December 16th about him, which was he had some scans. They're going to dial him back, and we'll get an update in 4 to 6 weeks with the next set of scans. You don't need to give us this kind of weird mid-update that doesn't tell us anything. Even Zion's quote doesn't really give us much, but we'll get into that here in a second. So, why did they put this out? Is this in response to something? Is this them trying to kind of wrestle control of a narrative that's gotten away from them, which is what these largely are? And I think the answer is somewhat yes. I have been pointing this out for about a month now. Zion Williamson has not been on the bench with the team, right? He was there for the win on December 10th against the Detroit Pistons. He was in town on the 11th. And then we haven't seen him since. He has not been on the bench. They had a 2-game road trip. He was not in San Antonio. He was not in Oklahoma City. You didn't see him back in New Orleans at any point after that. You haven't seen, you didn't see him on the bench for the Cleveland Cavaliers win. You didn't see him on the bench for the win over the Milwaukee Bucks before that. And you haven't seen him in the new year in the games that they've played so far. So he hasn't been on the bench with the team. If he's here, you'd expect to see him there. Injured players are there. He was on the bench and traveling on the road with the team up until this injection and other things came up. So it's a little weird that all of a sudden he stopped being there when he had been rehabbing with the team, right? And I think part of it is people finally noticed it, despite me saying it on there. I've had this question a lot on Twitter the past couple of weeks of like, where's Zion? Why isn't he on the bench? So I wonder if the Pelicans finally started to realize people were asking that sort of question and decided to put out a statement that says like, no, we know where he is and we're dealing with this. And Woj of ESPN and Andrew Lopez of ESPN even kind of clarified in their article talking about this statement that New Orleans put out that basically said like New Orleans sent him out to Portland themselves. They arranged travel for him is the line. So this is New Orleans trying to tell you or show you, hey, Zion's not going rogue. Everything's copacetic between him and us, and we actually want him to do this, right? This is the quote from David Griffin in this. We also agreed that in order to put Zion in the best position to succeed, he will rehab away from the team at this time so he can focus on the task at hand. Look, that's a load of BS. He could rehab fine here in New Orleans. I'm not upset that he's away from the team. I don't think, again, that it's truly that big of a deal. But is it actually the best if he's away? I just mentioned that Klay Thompson had been rehabbing away from the team. You know what? There's also a ton of articles out there, and you can go hear it from Steph and Kerr, that they wanted him around the team, even when he was out for the season and not expected to play. They wanted him around there to build camaraderie with the guys, to develop chemistry, to learn more about the offense and the defensive concepts that they're trying to put in. And look, what Willie Green is doing, very different than what Stan Van Gundy did, and very different than what Alvin Gentry did. Having Zion in film is probably not a bad thing. Having him watch practices to see the schemes and all of that is only going to be a good thing if you expect him to play this season, right? You want him to be up to speed on all of that and to develop some stuff with these guys. But he's been distant from them. He wasn't there in Nashville with them. Again, might not mean anything. Or maybe there is a little bit of a fracture, and maybe, I think so, he doesn't trust this medical staff. And he doesn't want to rehab here. And he goes, screw it, I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to go rehab elsewhere with my people, my Nike people. Aaron Nelson's one of the best in the business, right? If you hired that group to be the best and to make sure your players were healthy and coming back, how is it better that Zion goes away? Does Nike have better facilities, better stuff than the Pelicans do? Because it wouldn't shock me, to be perfectly honest, but that's a little bit of a damning thing to say, right? Or is it that he just doesn't trust these guys? And I think it's more that, and that probably goes back to the rookie year, right? Of bringing him along slowly, maybe even saving him from himself in a way. But that has clearly created some distrust between Zion and his camp in this franchise and organization. And I think that's a little bit of what you're seeing here. So by putting this statement out, the Pelicans try and kind of cut off a lot of that. The problem is they do it in just such a clunkily worded way and something that doesn't need to be a thing. There was going to be no story about Zion Williamson today anywhere, if they don't put this statement out. No one would have said anything for like 2 more weeks, right? I had people texting me the other day, like, when are we hearing about Zion? I said, probably the end of January. I did a segment on this on the show last week, right? Of the update on Zion, saying I'm not expecting to hear anything until the end of January because that's the timeline that they laid out. This didn't need to be a story, but they put this out because people were asking questions like, where is Zion? You didn't need to say anything. There's no news in this update whatsoever, but they made it a thing. And to then say, we agreed that this is only good for him to be away from the team. I don't know. Maybe David Griffin knows more than Steph Curry and Steve Kerr does. You know, just guys that have won NBA titles and is one of the more successful coaches in the league right now. Maybe they were wrong, and Klay Thompson shouldn't have been around those guys, right? After back-to-back basically missing the entire season. If you're watching on YouTube, that's my skeptical face right there. Or maybe Zion was like, I'm not going to be here. I'm not saying for sure either way. And I think they're also going to like acquiesce to what Zion wants. And also they're doing this to protect him and not make him necessarily look like a bad guy who's going rogue if it were to maybe come out due to pictures or whatever. And I don't know if this is going to be the case, that he's somewhere else. Or when someone like me points out he hasn't been on the bench for a while. And then people start to take note of that. They want to try and get out ahead of it. It's just a weird... You see why I said there's 2 ways to read this? Like, there's on the surface of like, yeah, this all makes sense, no big deal. But then it's like, but why do you need to say that? And this is kind of weird. Like, this is a front office who does media stuff in a very reactive way. And the narrative starts to get away from him. And then they put out these freaking weird statements that are designed to kind of like wrestle control of the narrative back, but then creates like you squeeze too hard and it like slips out of your hand or something like that. It's just a really like weird statement to say. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, right? I don't know. I have some idea. But, I think I am to a certain degree, but it's a little bit strange. Notice they don't give you any actual medical update in here, right? Zion just says this is hard. Of course it's hard. It's rehab. You're coming back from an injury. This sucks. No one likes this, let alone him. I know he wants to play. I know he wants to play this season. I can tell you that as a fact. So of course it's hard, but you're giving us an update saying he's still not doing anything really? So he's just going to do it away from the team? And what does that say about the team and everything here? It opens up just another can of worms that didn't need to be opened up, that the team putting the statement out did. There's a very simple way to fix this. Let's talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march towards the playoffs and beyond, especially with NBA action every single night. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. Whether it's football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, and all the odds and props you could want. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Talking everything you want to know. This is the biggest story around a team. Around this team, you've got to talk about Zion. You've got to do it in the days after it happens, and a lot of places aren't doing that. We're doing it here Monday through Friday, talking about whatever the biggest stories are. Win, loss, player news. We got the trade deadline coming up. I was on a call today with Locked On kind of planning a lot of the coverage out for the trade deadline, so it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot on that too for you here. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And now for your second listen, go check out Locked On Saints. Get everything you need to know black and gold with host Ross Jackson, who literally is one of my favorite people in sports media, and I think is an up-and-coming star if he really wants to be. He's been doing this less than I have, and he is much better than me. So go listen to Locked On Saints. Dude is awesome. I'm excited for the chance that the Saints can make it into the playoffs. They need a little bit of help, but they also got to win. How are they going to do that? He's going to let you know over at the Locked On Saints podcast. All right, we're talking about the Zion Williamson injury update. Like I said, 2 ways to read it. One is no big deal. This is normal. Players do this all the time. Even though teams would like them to rehab there. Look, Clippers would like Kawhi Leonard rehabbing with them. When he was with the Spurs, you better believe they would have preferred that he rehabbed there instead of staying away and creating that big fracture that eventually led to a trade to the Toronto Raptors, right? So, yeah, they're saying that he could do this anywhere. He can rehab anywhere. It'd be better if it was in New Orleans. I'd prefer it if it was in New Orleans. In theory, it should be fine in New Orleans and not be elsewhere. But that's not what the statement said. And so that leaves these kind of open-ended questions, I think. And in today's show, this is what I'm asking you. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Is this a big deal or no big deal? Are you kind of in segment 1 or segment 2 here of today's show? But regardless, look, it's not great, right? Everyone's frustrated with this. I've had people being I kind of forget about him now. I don't really pay attention to this stuff. And, he's going to be back when he's back, and then I'll be happy. And in the meantime, I'm not going to get worked up about it. That's probably the right move. I agree. But there's a way to fix all of this. There's a way to fix all of this. I've talked about it before. Stop lying, be transparent. Look, the team doesn't owe you deep explanations on injuries or anything like that. If you're a season ticket holder and you're frustrated with this, I get it. But look at the back of your ticket where it kind of lays everything out. None of it is they need to be upfront with you about injuries and kind of keep you in the loop of all of this stuff. Do they pull some shady tactics around renewals and all that? Yeah, of course. And they got ticket renewals coming up, and I'm going to be curious to see how they handle that. But they don't owe you this. It's a dude's health. These things are kind of kept quiet anyway. And look, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that depends on a lot of secrecy. You don't just kind of throw that information out there. But at this point, this is starting to get away from New Orleans. You're hitting the point of okay, maybe we need to kind of look at this as crisis management. Right? And what do you do when there's an emergency and you've got to kind of go into damage control? And that's a little bit, I think, what New Orleans is starting to do. The fact that this is Zion's first quote since Media Day is bad. And it's not it doesn't say anything in there, right? It's just pointless. And you can tell that this quote has been sanitized by the PR team and probably written for him. I don't know if he would have said this himself and they were like, Zion, can we get a quote from you? It was like, hey, Zion, what if you said this and we quote you on it? I don't know for sure, but I'd be willing to bet it's some degree like that, right? You know, that's not exactly how he talks. So if it's a direct quote from him, no, he didn't say this to the media. He hasn't spoken since media day to be able to answer honestly and in the moment. So to see this doesn't really impact me one way or the other. There's a simple way to fix this. There's such a simple way to fix this. And for whatever reason, probably due to Zion's camp, definitely due to Zion's camp, he doesn't want to do this. And I don't know why. And I think it makes him look worse. Come out and just say what's going on. You don't owe us that. But if you want to kind of quiet this all down, not have me do a 20-minute podcast episode on this, come out and go, and this is probably what it is, right? My foot's not healing as well as I would like. It sucks. I really want to be out there. I really want to play. I would do anything to be out there and play right now. It's just not healing. I'm a big dude. It takes a while, you know, blood flow, whatever is causing it. Kind of be upfront in the most general terms possible and be like, you know, I'm hopeful it'll heal. We did the injection to really try and stimulate healing and try and get it going. You know, as soon as I can be out there, I'm absolutely going to be out there. This is just taking longer than anyone expected. No setback, just one of those things. You kind of do the shrug, right? And that's it. If you had just said that, if that was the statement here, like, we'd be cool with it. There wouldn't be a second segment of the show being like, what's really going on here? You know, we wouldn't have been asking as many questions all year long. And if anything, there would be a ton of sympathy for Zion Williamson. But they want to not make him look weak, I think. You know, Christian Clark laid it out in that article. You've heard other people kind of hint at it, that like, this is what his family wants. They don't want you to know he's hurt for whatever reason. And just be upfront and honest and stop kind of trying to make all of this cloudy, and people would get it. And I think they would understand, and this wouldn't be a big deal. And instead you do something like this, which makes it a big deal. This is not what we were going to talk about today, but we have to talk about this because it's that big of a story. And so this is only going to get more complicated when season ticket renewals are going to start in like a month or two, probably less than that, you know? And so how do you handle this sort of thing? And you could just be upfront. You don't need to be. They don't owe you that. But if you want to make this all go away, it's the simplest route to take. But for whatever reason, maybe the team wants to and Zion doesn't. Maybe the team also doesn't want to. We don't know because no one's telling us anything. And so it's a frustrating situation, you know, to really see. So there you go. I don't know. You know, it's going to be kind of interesting, but that's the way to fix it. So let me know in the comments below. Is this a big deal or not a big deal? Is this a story or not a story? Or are you somewhere in the middle and you're not sure, and maybe there's more to come on this when it comes to Zion and the team? So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. There's a game tonight. We'll talk about it in tomorrow's show. Maybe finally get to the segment of like Pelicans got screwed by the NBA when it comes to the schedule and that Philly game and all of that. So now for your second listen, go check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with you all tomorrow to recap the game or talk about who knows what at this point.